West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
As of today, the Department of Justice says 443 people have been charged in D.C. federal court related to crimes committed at the U.S. Capitol. The court filings are providing a clearer picture of the type of people who tried to overthrow the government that day. Like Ryan Samsel of Pennsylvania, who was arrested on January 30th, charged with, among other things, forcibly assaulting a federal agent. Prosecutors say Samsel, here in the light blue jacket, was one of the very first Trump supporters to approach a police barricade surrounding the Capitol while Trump was still speaking. They say in the process of pushing the barricades to the ground, Samsel and others knocked over a U.S. Capitol police officer, causing the officer's head to hit the stairs behind her, resulting in a loss of consciousness. That is her there on the ground. She later blacked out and collapsed and had to be transported to the emergency room. Samsel has been in jail since his arrest, and today prosecutors filed a motion to keep him there until his trial. Part of that is based on an extensive history of violence. In 2009, Samsel was convicted of assaulting a woman and choking her to the point of unconsciousness. In 2011, a conviction for choking and beating his pregnant girlfriend. In 2019, yet another victim recounted several incidents where he broke into her house and assaulted her. She also alleged Samsel raped her multiple times. So that's just one example of some of the people that Republicans in Congress do not want to investigate. Because even though that day is over, that person is now in jail, the slow-motion insurrection's ongoing. This weekend, a superseding indictment against a far-right militia group called the Oath Keepers was unsealed. That revealed communications where one member of the group said, "We want Trump to declare an insurrection and to call us up as the militia." This weekend, Trump's former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn suggested a military coup should happen in the United States. Now, political reporter Hunter Walker reports that just over a month ago, Donald Trump met with a tech CEO who helped organize patriot caravans from around the country to the protests at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. It's not really over to those who overran the Capitol or their supporters. They're regathering. Hunter Walker wrote that story about Donald Trump, the Patriot Caravans organizer. He writes the morning politics newsletter, The Uprising, which I'm a subscriber to and is very good, and he joins me now. Hunter, tell us about this guy.
So this guy his name is Jeff Brain. That is his real name. He's no stranger to political activism. In the 90s and early 2000s, the LA Times has reported he was part of this effort to have the San Fernando Valley secede from the city of Los Angeles. More recently, in 2018, he launched this website, Clout Hub, and he's explicitly framed it as a social media network, for people who are concerned about, quote, censorship. And what that means in practice, some of the most popular forums on the site are all about QAnon. And in the lead up to January 6th, there were these patriot caravans group where people were planning travel, including renting charter buses to go to the Capitol protests. And most importantly, Jeff Brain was personally participating in the main Patriot Caravans for 45 group, he had a message pinned at the top of it. He was encouraging people to plan to go to the Capitol. And also, this Clout Hub caravan group was featured on the website of the Wild Protest, which is the rally that day that was run by Ali Alexander of the quote-unquote Stop the Steal movement. And that's the rally that occurred in tandem with Trump's rally on the Mall, where they explicitly drew people to the north steps of the Capitol. And on Jeff Brain's site, Clout Hub, there was a picture of Trump supporters, and this obviously ran before the protest actually occurred, a picture of Trump supporters sort of en masse in front of the Capitol dome. It eerily prefigured what happened that day.
A few weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal was reporting on Trump's continued ban from many of the major social media platforms and his itchiness to get out of that. Donald Trump, sidelined by Twitter, Inc. and Facebook, Inc. have been talking with numerous platforms as he seeks a new online megaphone. Jeff Brain, the chief executive of Clout Hub, a fledgling social media network that's become popular with conservatives, thinks his company fits the bill. I imagine we don't know exactly what he was doing down in Mar-a-Lago, but that seems a possibility.
Yeah, so the Wall Street Journal reported that he was there and had a brief chat with Trump about the president potentially going over to Clout Hub. According to my source who provided me this photo, he was there at Mar-a-Lago seeking funding for his site. And I think that's quite notable because, Mar-a-Lago is a private club. And generally, to get in there, you need to know a member or be a member yourself. The president and his team have not responded to me, about how Jeff Brain ended up there or what he and the president talked about or how long they spent together. But I can tell you, I've been, we can get a glimpse of President Trump's post-presidential life through Instagram. And I've been watching him every day almost at Mar-a-Lago. And he seems to participate in these events and fundraisers. He is often greeted by cheering supporters, and not everyone who's there gets a picture with the president. So Jeff Brain somehow got in there, got close to the president, and this is in spite of the fact that earlier this year, I reported on these Patriot Caravan groups he ran, so this was a known thing, and I reported on that in conjunction with his speech at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, where he participated in a joint event with Matt Gaetz. So what I find really interesting about this is in spite of the fact he played a very active role in the organization and planning of the January 6th protests, he's been embraced by Republicans, all the way up to President Trump.
Right. You say despite, I would say because of, right? What's happened is that has become, Steve Bannon has said this clearly, that's essentially the litmus test, right? That the sort of the kind of the vanguard of delusion of anti-democratic, attempt at a putsch that represented by Stop the Steal, that is essentially the canonical view of a MAGA-controlled party. And so a person like Jeffrey Brain would be welcomed with open arms.
Yeah, I got to say, I still find it stunning. I was there on January 6th that day. It was an attack on this country. It was a literal attack on the seat of government. I've reported on The Uprising. People can read this at theuprising.info, that police records show how many people had guns that day. And yet on Capitol Hill, we've seen people like Paul Gosar and Louis Gohmert repeat these lies that, this was an unarmed protest, that, they were quote unquote like tourists, right? And it's wild to me how much the Republican Party has embraced this violent attack on the country, and also, how much the general public, frankly, has moved on from this. Yeah. What was the ribbon color for January 6th, right? What was the slogan? This stunning attack that could have been so much deadlier happened on the country, and we're just not talking about it. And the plotters and people who are enabling them are just moving about in the open. And I can tell you, I don't plan to let go of this story at all.
It is Thursday, the 3rd of June of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, just a little bit of spice in your life. That's right, season your chicken, stop making excuses. You don't want to be a social outcast. Just season the chicken. Hey, Mom's home. Yes, we had a scare And I should say that maybe, she's not out of the woods. My mom's 84. And we all know about the attendant problems when you live long enough to have an attendant problem. So she's tough. She walked to the gate, as I mentioned, to the front gate. And that's a bit of a jaunt for her in her condition. But, there's a bit of a worry. I suppose I shouldn't divulge too much. I mean, it is her private health stuff. But she wants to tell the whole neighborhood anyway. That's how she is. So, we don't want to worry her too much. But there's some test results that come back that we don't like. And when I say we, I mean my sister, who's younger than me. I happen to be the oldest. Anyway, my sister, who is in the nursing profession still, though she will be retiring, she's doing sort of like the professor emeritus thing where, she's getting like half class load. But there's always something that draws her right back in. She's a bit concerned about my mom's hemoglobin count, so you can take that for what it is. Mom had been dehydrated, as I mentioned. It's been quite hot here, and she likes to go out and do things, and work in the garden and putt around. Yes, but she was puttering around, and I thought that she got a little bit overheated, which she did, and she just was not retaining the electrolytes that is needed, and water doesn't really have them. Sodas, or colas, sodas, soft drinks. There we go, soft drinks. We call them sodas where I come from. I don't know what you call it, but soft drinks, it's sugar water. It's not really enough. So they did hook her up to an IV, and got that part of the electrolytes back in order. But there's some more tests going on. I think we need to get she has a hospital bed, but it's a bit up off the ground, and she's not a tall gal, so we're going to look for a different hospital bed type bed for her. The one we have is actually quite nice. Has a little massager shaker thing that helps her, and does all the hospital bed folding and laying flat and all this stuff. So heated, cooling when, so it's a nice bed, but it's a bit up off the ground, and we don't want her climbing. No. So got to go look for that and replace the one that she has. So it's been a bit of a concern because, it's a little bit different than just like toppling over. How's your day going? Yes, we're in a heat wave, and it looks like the earth is running out of water, at least where we're at. On the other hand, where did I see that there's, maybe it's the Amazon. Massive river levels. Yeah, I guess some glaciers are melting up in the Andes, huh? Working their way down. And they are. All the way out to sea. Scouring everything in its path. So, lots of other news in the world. Apparently, Glenn Greenwald's in the news again. Why? Because it's Glenn Greenwald. What the heck is that guy thinking? And in our news read today, we have, Mitch McConnell. I saw where Al Franken was interviewed on one of the cable stations, and he said, rightfully, that it's going to be Mitch McConnell that destroyed America. That's what people are going to remember. They're going to show that picture of the guy, and everybody's going to wonder, how the hell did that happen? Look at that guy. All right. They think they are better than us. We are evil, sinful people, and they are pure and righteous and blessed by God to be where they are. And you know what it is? It's a justification. It is an excuse. Meritocracy, give me a break. Blessed by God to rule. Yeah. Anybody who says that, I think probably should not be ruling. All right. An enlightened despot knows that that is a disqualifier right there. How many enlightened despots do we have these days? Not many. Well, why don't we just go ahead and tell you what's in store for you here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. As we start off, hey, just over a month ago, Trump met with that tech CEO who helped organize patriot caravans from around the country to the insurrection on January 6th. And you know what? Do not let it go. It wasn't a protest. It wasn't a riot. It was an insurrection, a coup. And it is ongoing. And it became an insurrection when electeds became involved and remain involved. That's the definition of an insurrection. Do not let it go. Do not. Well, as I alluded to Mitch McConnell, he considers it an exotic notion to cite the year 1619 as a key historical moment in American history because there was a lot of slavery going on around the world during that time. Yeah, there was, wasn't there, Mitch? And they came here. California urged the EPA to reverse a Trump administration policy and let the state set stricter vehicle emission standards. Try saying that fast. And a move by Texas Governor Greg Abbott to shutter more than 50 shelters housing about 4,000 migrant children could seriously disrupt a national program meant to keep them out of unlicensed, mass-scale facilities. Cruelty is always the point with these ghouls. Cruelty is always the point. After the break, we move to the chef's table where, here's some good news, the U.S. blacklisted 3 Bulgarians and 64 companies over corruption. Ties with Russia, by the way. And Brazil's Supreme Court authorized a criminal probe into the nation's environment minister. And he was doing some negotiations with the U.S. in the previous administration. I wonder why. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. The bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page, is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thanks, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link and the social media scroll, by the way, too, and we'll get to that in just a moment. There is, across the page, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the left is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, and if you could send those funds our way once a month and become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, your Patreonage allows us to pay our bills, fly under the radar, get the needed machinery and software that's needed in these times of woe, and continue this resistance broadcasting as we fly under the radar. Because we pay our bills. Thank you. And also thank you to those who have stepped up and increased their patronage for a few months. It was very helpful. Thank you. Whew, boy. And also thank you to all of those who have been Patreons or supporters of Netroots Radio over all these many years. It is 10 years, and I'm going to be, flogging that horse maybe I shouldn't be so cruel. I won't. But anyway, I'm going to keep bringing it up because we're happy about that. You know, you last a decade because of perseverance and, unfortunately, a Nazi takeover of the United States. They're not going to get away with it. They will not. I can attest to that. It's of the American character. And how do I know? Well, we were appointed by God. No. No, it's not that at all. We just like living in calm communities. Potholes filled up. Maybe a public swimming pool for the kids and swimming lessons when they're 3 so they don't drown. Yes, you know, living in civilization. I love that. And the idea of civilization usually doesn't mean jackboots. Usually. Okay. So thanks anyway for being so generous over all these many years. We are going to keep it up, and thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio, because that's where the social media scroll is over there at the bottom of our homepage on the right. And Tom takes care of that and so much more. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary for the show on there. Also, just as a reminder, there's a Sunday music show, veiled reference to politics, only through an artistic attempt at artistry, shall we say. Anyway, a worldwide playlist that's very eclectic, if I might say so myself, because I myself do it. The Justice Department Music Sans Frontières on Sunday nights, and you can get a podcast of that too, so look for it. Anyway, follow me on Twitter, because I post that show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before show times, and then get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. And I got, the better part of this month before Zuckerberg allows me back for a few days. And I'm sure it's only going to be a few days, because whenever there's like another concerted effort for a Nazi battle, lots of us just get X'd out of Facebook. Others get X'd out of Twitter. I wonder if it's a plan. Anyway, it's a very coincidental coincidence. So, yes, you can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. I'll get through this, I promise. And please do, as I mentioned, pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, Mitch McConnell. Some people just like power. And I think they like money, too. Maybe it's a toss-up. Money and power are synonymous to these people, apparently. And when you're in the prosperity gospel, and somehow you've gotten rich by, well, subterfuge, because you've been blessed by God, so it's okay. I guess these guys can get away with anything. They think they are better than us. Do we think we are better than them? No. We think we're equal. And apparently, to a certain, I don't know, damaged minds, equality means to them that they're losing something rather than gaining something. If I am equal to that, that means that I'm being brought down, rather than they're being brought up to your exalted level. Should be proud of that. Jeez, what a bunch of dimwits. Anyway, Oliver Willis, I call him the great Oliver Willis, from the American Independent, penned this first piece. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said yesterday, Wednesday, that efforts to expand understanding of black history in America and its relationship with slavery were misguided because there was a lot of slavery going around in the world at that time. Jeez. At an appearance in Shelbyville, Kentucky, McConnell was asked about ongoing Republican attacks on efforts to include more information on race and racism in school curricula. McConnell responded that he didn't think the government ought to be able to dictate, in effect, what's taught, but was quick to fault curriculum with a critical eye toward U.S. history. We don't think that there should be any government shouldn't step in and tell people what to teach unless they're trying to teach about the facts. Okay. Sounds like a Southern mindset. Well, when I say Southern mindset, I mean Southern white mindset from the antebellum era. I think criticizing such things as the 1619 Project, which tends to put that date as something uniquely American. There was a lot of slavery going around in the world in the early 1600s, said McConnell. He added, we fought the Civil War in order to put our original sin behind us. We passed the Voting Rights Act in 1965 in order to further enfranchise minorities in our country. And what he doesn't say is as soon as they did it, then they started taking their rights away again. And did this original sin really was left behind us? If that's the case, how come all those military bases and all those statues of veneration and exaltation and, oh, we must bow down to Robert E. Lee because he protected the South from the northern aggressors? Government shouldn't dictate what's taught in the schools unless they're not teaching about the northern aggressor. Okay, Mitch, we see you. Now, the Senate Minority Leader was referring to a collaborative effort by the New York Times and New York Times Magazine called the 1619 Project, which is so named for the year enslaved Americans were first brought to the United States. That moment in history was followed by the importation of thousands of enslaved blacks to America and subsequently hundreds of years of enslavement and systemic racism that has followed. McConnell also said he did not believe the government is any better at prescribing what ought to be taught in the schools, but that statement runs contrary to his own recent actions. In April, McConnell and a group of nearly 40 other Senate Republicans sent a letter to Education Secretary Miguel Cardona to drop a proposal that would give grants to programs addressing systemic racism. Do you ever notice that the only people who are against systemic racism and getting rid of it are racists? Jeez. The letter describes such programs as activist indoctrination and referred to the 1619 Project as debunked advocacy that would be spoon-feeding students a slanted story. Because they want the world to believe that America began at Plymouth Rock. That was just when English people landed, getting away from England because they were being persecuted for their religion. And what was their religion? Yikes. Well, let's put it this way. We wouldn't have Q if we didn't have the Pilgrims. Remember, Josh Hawley, Matt Gaetz, Ted Cruz, oh my God, Marjorie Taylor Greene, John Cornyn, Lauren Berbert. Remember, I'm starting to think it might even be Manchin and Sinema. They all think they are better than you. Okay? That's how they think they're going to get away with it. What's up with that Sinema thing standing there with Cornyn, too, talking about the filibuster that she knows nothing about? You know, I keep dragging Berbert and Marjorie Taylor Greene for their lack of civics knowledge. What's up with Sinema? Huh? Well, we can't give her a break just because she's marginally on our side. Matthew Daly from the Associated Press brings us this next offering here. In the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Officials from California, New York, and other states urged the Environmental Protection Agency yesterday, Wednesday, to allow California to set its own automobile tailpipe pollution standards, an action that would reverse a Trump administration policy and could help usher in stricter emission standards for new passenger vehicles nationwide. You know, since the EPA was created way back, since the Clean Air Act was passed way back during that commie Nixon's administration. Okay? Let's just be clear. This Trump administration policy was only in place during the Trump administration. Why is everything different because of that guy? The Biden administration has said it will withdraw Trump-era restrictions on state tailpipe emission rules and has moved to grant California permission to set more stringent pollution standards for cars and SUVs. That would give California greater leverage in discussions with automakers as states and federal officials seek a climate-friendly agreement on emission standards. At least 13 states and the District of Columbia have signed on to California's vehicle standards, which were established decades ago under a special waiver that the Trump administration revoked in 2019, just in time for the election. Collectively, they represent 36% of the U.S. auto market. Leanne Randolph, chair of the California Air Resources Board, said at a public hearing yesterday, Wednesday, that the Trump administration's withdrawal of California's long-standing waiver is ill-advised and illegal. Addressing EPA officials in an online hearing, Randolph said, "Time has continued to prove the importance and good sense of our program to restrict vehicle emissions. We know the air quality in California is cleaner today than in decades. Californians can see mountains in the LA area, no longer shrouded by smog, and the air quality continues to improve because of our program." Way back when I was in high school, I was appointed as the high school liaison for a select subcommittee for the county of Orange in Southern California to study and proffer recommendations on air quality, air pollution, etc., etc., etc. Now, one thing that was found when the paper was submitted, and one that's very obvious, is that air pollution is not relegated to a particular municipality. It kind of bleeds over a whole region. And so you can't have just one air quality standard, shall we say, in Buena Park, and another one over in, Costa Mesa, and another one in Brea, say. That all of these different municipalities within Orange County, and then, of course, there's got to be some negotiations and agreement with San Bernardino County, and Riverside County, and LA County, and it goes on and on and on. So, for California to say we want clean air, I don't think people understand really how bad it was. People talk about Mexico City being really bad. Who goes to Mexico City? Yeah. I'll tell you, the ones who have gone to Mexico City will come back and say, we don't want that here anymore. We've had that. And the ones who are afraid of everything that's not American have no idea. And they have no memory, probably, of how bad it was. California Attorney General Rob Bonta called the state vehicle emission standards critical to the fight against climate change and crucial to improve air quality, protect public health, and drive technological innovation. President Joe Biden has made slowing climate change a top priority, and his nearly $2 trillion infrastructure proposal includes 500,000 new charging stations for electric cars and trucks. Fully electric vehicles represent just 2% of the new vehicle sales in the U.S., but analysts expect that to rise rapidly in coming years. Major automakers, including General Motors and Ford, are pledging billions to develop electric cars and trucks, and GM has gone so far as to announce a goal of ending gasoline-fueled passenger vehicles entirely by 2035. Adriana Gomez-Licon and Acacia Coronado of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A move by Texas Governor Greg Abbott to shutter more than 50 shelters housing about 4,000 migrant children could seriously disrupt a national program that already faces strained capacity to properly care for minors crossing the U.S.-Mexico border alone. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which cares for migrant children, said yesterday, Wednesday, that it did not intend to close any facilities, but that it was assessing the Republican governor's late Tuesday disaster declaration. This is the guy that couldn't keep the power on during an Arctic freeze in Texas. Let's remember that. And now he's declaring a disaster because of people. Kids. The proclamation directs a state agency to deny or discontinue with 90 days licenses for child care facilities sheltering migrant children. Groups that represent migrant children and reunite them with their families said the order could be harmful because it may mean more minors are sent to mass-scale, unlicensed facilities that attorneys and advocates say endanger their health and safety. Abbott argues that the federal government can't force Texas to keep issuing state licenses in response to a federal problem. Well, you know what? Like air quality, Greg. It's like air quality. Everybody is responsible for it now, aren't they? The U.S. government funds 56 shelters in Texas out of about 200 licensed shelters in the country. The last census taken on May 19th showed 4,223 children in 52 of those state licensed shelters, according to the Texas Health and Human Services Commission. The agency was directed to remove the licenses and sent a notice to providers Wednesday telling them to wind down operations by August 30th. Oh, you're telling the feds what to do? After that date, it says if you are still providing care for individuals who are not lawfully present in the United States under a contract with the federal government, this department will take necessary steps to comply with the proclamation. In other words, they're pulling it out of their rear. You know what I mean. The highly unusual move to order a disaster declaration, usually reserved for natural disasters or health crises, comes amid Abbott's criticism of record numbers of border crossings in recent months. He has increased the presence of the Texas Department of Public Safety and National Guard in South Texas. Abbott has also been critical of emergency facilities that lack state licenses, which may end up taking in more children if his order succeeds in shuttering smaller shelters. In April, Texas officials announced they were investigating 3 reports alleging abuse and neglect at a San Antonio Coliseum holding more than 1,600 migrant teens. There has also been abuse or neglect investigations at state licensed facilities, and Texas lists 18 total citations between April and May. Some critics worry the disaster declaration could set a precedent for other Republican governors to thwart efforts by the Biden administration to increase capacity in a network of licensed shelters. Governors in Iowa and Nebraska have rejected federal requests to house migrant children, saying they oppose President Joe Biden's stance on caring for minors before they are reunited with family in the U.S. What the F are these Nazis up to? Why don't you just put on the swastika armband and straight arm a goose step and march? You effing Nazis! How dare they? This is a transparent and troubling ploy to politicize a humanitarian crisis, Krish Omera Vinaraja, head of the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, said in a statement. Because Texas-based shelters comprise a significant portion of U.S. capacity, this order could do real damage and to the serious detriment of children's well-being. Their whole premise for this cruelty in the Stephen Miller Nazi construct is that the more cruel we are, the less of them will come here. Instead of recognizing these are kids alone and you better take care of them, don't you have a moral obligation? Or are you a Nazi racist? The increasing arrival of migrant children has tested the Biden administration, with the U.S. government picking up nearly 19,000 children traveling alone across the Mexican border in March and more than 17,000 in April. The record-setting numbers come as the administration decided to exempt unaccompanied children from federal pandemic-related powers to immediately expel most migrants from the country without giving them an opportunity to seek asylum. The pandemic also meant less capacity at small and medium-sized shelters that care for minors. The program lost thousands of beds due to COVID-19 restrictions, bringing down the tally to about 7,100 by February. With fewer beds and smaller shelters and growing numbers of children crowding U.S. Border Patrol stations, the Biden administration awarded huge contracts to private companies to set up unlicensed emergency facilities at convention centers, military bases, and other large venues in March. These venues resemble hurricane evacuation shelters with little space to play and no privacy, and critics say the contractors are not equipped to adequately care for the minors. The Biden administration has maintained that the sites provide life-saving services for children, with officials assuring lawmakers that minors would be kept in large-scale settings no more than 2 weeks, then placed with family in the U.S. or sent to a permanent licensed facility. But some children have been at large venues much longer. Doing away with state-licensed shelters is a wrong-headed approach, said Wendy Young, president of the Kids in Need of Defense, which provides legal services to immigrant children, at a time when the United States needs far more licensed placement settings for unaccompanied migrant children. The order threatens to leave the nation with far less. Well, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Sarah Vitak. What if you could create household objects, say biogarments, kitchen appliances, or blinds and curtains that powered themselves using the sun, were fully recyclable, 100% biodegradable, sequestered carbon just by existing, filtered toxins out of the air, and were also alive? Dr. Maria Abentam at Delft University and a postdoc researcher in her lab, Dr. Srikant Balasubramanian, have gotten one step closer to making that a reality. They've created a 3D printed photosynthetic material made out of algae. Here is Dr. Abentam.
Yeah, we were interested in 3D printing a living material that's made of microalgae. And there were a couple example of 3D printed algae material already out there, but we were interested in making one that would be enough mechanically robust to be used in real applications, because a lot of these materials are based on hydrogel, which tend to be very fragile.
You might not have heard of hydrogels, but you've certainly used them. Wet disposable baby diapers, chia pudding, toy water beads. All of these are hydrogels that you might have around your house. But hydrogels aren't very strong or solid, so the team wanted to make something better. They already had a 3D printer that they had built in their lab to print materials with bacterial bioink. Bioink is a solution that contains living cells that you load into a 3D printer.
In the lab, we were also studying the microalgae, but for a different purpose. So we were interested in the physics of how it swims and how it moves the flow around itself when it swims.
They had the idea that maybe they could put the two together. They created a bioink out of living microalgae and printed it onto bacterial cellulose, a fibrous material that can be produced by bacteria. It grows as a rubbery film on top of the bacterial cultures, but when it's dried out, it's like a tough paper. The clever part of their method is that the algae bioink won't solidify until it comes into contact with calcium chloride. So they made calcium chloride petri dishes, they put the bacterial paper on top, and then printed directly onto that. That way, when the algae ink is printed, the calcium chloride will diffuse through the paper and cause it to solidify.
It worked actually surprisingly well. When we tried to put the algae inside the living material, almost immediately, I think the first trial, it immediately worked. So we saw that it was very promising. And then, we tried different conditions, different designs, and then we test the mechanical properties of this material.
The bacterial paper stays on the print like a backing and provides the material with more strength than the hydrogel alone would have. It can handle twisting and crushing. The material can survive 3 days on its own and at least a month, probably longer, if fed with nutrients every couple days. It can be kept in light or dark, and it can easily be dissolved, and the algae can be removed and placed right back into the printer to make more material. Or, alternatively, it's fully biodegradable. The printed material won't grow noticeably in volume over time, but the number of cells increase, and so does the amount of chlorophyll. Best of all, this process is relatively inexpensive. Here's Dr. Balasubramanian.
And one biggest advantage of our approach with a 3D printer is that it is really cost effective, because if you consider 3D printers that are already available in the market that can print living cells, they are probably in the price range of $100,000. But our 3D printer is just like less than $250 US. It's like a do-it-yourself 3D printer. So anybody can actually do this printing at home.
And in fact, all the instructions for printing are available in their paper published in the journal Advanced Functional Materials. A previous paper from the group has all the details of how to build the printer, so you really could do it at home. Ultimately, the possibilities with this kind of material are many. From creating synthetic leaves, to producing oxygen for life in outer space, to filtering contaminants out of the air and water, to photosynthetic textiles. But those applications are all still a little ways in the future. The team's proof-of-concept prints were relatively flat, about 10 to 20 layers high, so their next big hurdle is getting height.
Because one of the limitations with our current approach is that in order for the hydrogel to solidify, there needs to be some calcium that diffuse all the way into the print. That limits the height that we can achieve.
But they are already well underway in taking their material to new heights. And some of their prints have even been shipped to a few people's homes, a kind of living material live test. So sun-powered blinds or an apron that sequesters carbon might be a reality sooner than you think. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Sarah Vitale.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day striking Toledo auto light workers ratified an agreement securing a number of first gains. Workers won union recognition, wage increases, mechanisms to arbitrate grievances and demands, and the rehiring of all workers. National Guard troops were withdrawn 2 days later. It was truly a breakthrough in industrial organizing. Victory was ensured by a number of factors. Certainly, the 6-day running battles that killed 2 strikers and injured hundreds more had a profound impact. But by the end of May, 85 of the 103 unions affiliated with Toledo's Central Labor Union had voted in favor of a general strike. As well, the powerful Edison workers demanded raises and union recognition with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Their business agent led the Committee of 23 that sought to organize the general strike in Toledo. On June 1st, 40,000 trade unionists amassed for a rally at Lucas County Courthouse Square, ready to strike. By then, the AFL had already appealed to President Roosevelt to intervene. Edison workers won big the next day with a 22% raise and union recognition. And then the tentative agreement was reached between Autolite and the UAW Local 18364. Historian Brian Palmer notes, these victories wrote finish to any mobilization for a general strike, but they paved the way for ongoing union victories in the automobile industry. Before the year was out, 19 more auto parts plants in Toledo would fall to union organizers. A General Motors plant was rocked with the first successful strike in the history of this corporate giant, the opening blow in what proved to be a long and taxing effort to establish trade unionism in the open shop bastions of the automobile industry.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. And we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting to be considerably cooler than yesterday, only supposed to be around 92, which means it still could be around 100 here at the mothership. Well, they say it's going to be cooler, and it looks like we may have a cooling trend through the weekend, hopefully. When I say a cooling trend, something below 90. Wouldn't that be lovely? Right now, we'll have plenty of sunshine throughout the day. Winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Partly cloudy skies tonight with, thankfully, lows in the upper 50s. We were about mid-60s last night. I think that's a little bit too warm. We don't want to turn on any air conditioning when we don't need it now, do we? And the winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour tonight. Generally sunny tomorrow with a high about 88. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Winds will be picking up out of the northwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have now increased to 11,283, and the confirmed deceased have increased from 143 to 145. Grass pollen is rated very high right outside the mothership here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 30 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is very high at 9. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.97 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is drying out at 60%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 75 and partly cloudy. Paris is 80 and partly cloudy. Rome is 82 and sunny. Kyiv is 68 and fair. Kabul is at 82 degrees and fair. Hong Kong is 81 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 68 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 55 and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 52 and mostly cloudy with a fog advisory on the bay. And New York is 65 degrees Fahrenheit with a rain shower. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Talia Solova and Daphne Saladakis of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. The United States, yesterday Wednesday, imposed sanctions on 3 Bulgarians and 64 companies linked to them over alleged corruption, including an oligarch accused of planning to create a conduit for Russian political leaders to influence the Bulgarian government. The Treasury Department, in a statement, called the move its single biggest action targeting graft to date. Bulgaria ranks as the EU's most corrupt member state. The Balkan country has repeatedly been criticized by the European Commission for failing to root out corruption and place a single high-ranking senior official behind bars for graft. Bulgarian interim Prime Minister Stefan Yanev said he was informed by U.S. Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs Victoria Nuland by telephone about the move, part of the efforts to effectively combat corruption in Bulgaria. The move comes ahead of a July 11 snap parliamentary election in Bulgaria and after massive anti-corruption protests in 2020. The Treasury Department said it imposed sanctions on businessman and oligarch Vasil Bozkov, age 64, accusing him of planning to create a channel for Russian leaders to influence the Bulgarian government and bribing government officials. Sounds familiar. Bozkov, a gambling tycoon and one of Bulgaria's richest men, fled the country in 2020 to escape criminal charges, including extortion, tax fraud, and influence peddling, among others. He denies any wrongdoing and is now based in Dubai.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Ricardo Brito of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Brazilian Supreme Court judge has authorized a criminal investigation into allegations that Environment Minister Ricardo Salles obstructed a police probe into illegal logging, according to a document seen by Reuters yesterday, Wednesday. The decision came in response to a request by Brazil's top prosecutor, known as the PGR. It comes as Bolsonaro's government is also facing criticism over high COVID-19 deaths and case numbers. A representative for Salles denied all wrongdoing. Salles has been leading U.S.-Brazil talks over funding to protect the Amazon jungle, the world's largest rainforest, which is under threat from logging and fires. Last month, police searched properties connected to Salles and other officials in a probe of allegations reasons. They allowed illegal exports of timber from the Amazon region to the United States and to Europe. Well, well, well. And that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we'll meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver.